Welcome to Twigg and Jenkins. We are here with one of my favorite authors.
Thank you.
One of my favorite humans, Marianne Williamson. You just got back from Detroit.
I did.
We got to hear all about it. Twigg and I were invited, which was very generous.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they even invited us, to be honest, because we've been
go
very
to
critical.
the candidate forum in the DNC candidate race forum. And part of the critique that we have is like, why is this not a more open and transparent thing? Why
Yes.
are we not trying to involve people in the People's Party, so to speak? But then neither of us could make
But
it.
you were
so.
invited.
But we were invited.
So that was transparency and openness.
Yes. So how was it, Marianne?
was it?
Tell us.
Well, there are seasons in life. And since the election, Democrats have had to go through a lot of internal soul searching, looking in the mirror, learning hopefully lessons. I think ultimately the only failure in life is what you fail to learn from. But now a new phase needs to begin. Donald Trump will be inaugurated president in a couple of days. And now it needs to be a phase of new beginnings. It's time to process everything that has been learned, some of it painfully, and move on to that next phase of things. So how it was, for me, talking to many members of the DNC, there's great talent there, some great intelligence, great great decency and real desire to do the right thing. Everybody understands. It's kind of like we get it. People get it. Mistakes of the past. But there comes a time when there's just so much of that, and it's time to move on to the next phase and begin again, and this time do it better. So I believe that there are people within the DNC who still are holding on to an old paradigm and an old way of doing things, which is very top-down, very much power-centered at the top, the money at the top, the power at the top, the decision-making at the top, consultancy groups here in Washington, D.C. But I think that there are enough people who realize those days have got to be over. So we'll see how it plays out before the beginning of February when there's an election. But hopefully the Democrats will take a new tack. I certainly am ready to, and I think a lot of people are ready to.
How did you make your decision to run?
I think it was Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I was watching. Obviously, I had a personal interest in how this race was going because I had seen up close. I had been at the effect of a dysfunctional DNC. I had seen how the behavior of the DNC, its official behavior, had affected not just me, but the election. So obviously I was curious and I was looking. And then I don't know what it was that Musk did. It was something that Musk did or something he said. And I said, oh, wow. Donald Trump is not an ordinary politician. And ordinary politics will not defeat him. I'm fascinated by the adrenaline rush that he has created. I see the psychological and emotional thrall. This will not be overcome by the same old politics. He has ushered in an age of political theater, and we won't be going back. Both of you understanding and in your own work recognizing that interface of the creative. The politics that is too often prevalent within the Democratic Party is somewhere back in like late 1990s, early 2000s, maybe. This is a different time, and it just breaks my heart sometimes to see the Republican Party be in its own way almost more savvy psychologically. And I feel that my background, and that's how I feel about running, I feel that my not being a political insider is the good news, not the bad news.
Yes.
But there's great institutional resistance inside the party, just like there's great institutional resistance inside the country to letting go. It's like a tight fist. This is our story. We're sticking to it. And, of course, the problem with that tight fist is that it belongs to people who they have the same money and power no matter who's in the White House.
Yeah.
Whether or not their kids can eat won't be affected. Whether or not their children get asthma from a toxic fumes won't be affected.
Yeah.
Whether or not their kids can go to college won't be affected. And that's why I felt when I ran, we have to speak far more to the visceral experience of the average American. And we certainly have to now, because Trump is savvy enough that he at least pretends to.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so true. You are hitting the nail on the head with. So Twig and I have interviewed how many candidates now? We've interviewed Wickler,
4.
Nate, Martin O'Malley.
Ken?
We've not interviewed
Ken.
Ken
yet, and this
Is
is the
he
reason.
going to?
It's the reason why Ken's not going to win. I'm just going to say it, Ken. Come on, Twig and Jenkins.
Well,
I'm kidding,
his
I'm kidding.
staff is, I mean,
I
we've
think
been
we're gonna have
talking
Ken
to
on.
his staff.
Yeah.
They keep saying they want to do it, but then they don't make him available. So we'll see.
But here's the thing, Marianne. Every single time, we've loved everyone we've spoken to. But I've loved your remarks during the forum, which I watched. I watched with 29 other people on Instagram Live, by the way. That was the total number of people watching live, was 30 people.
On Instagram.
On Instagram
Was it also
Live.
streamed live on YouTube?
It was streamed on YouTube. I think I looked at the numbers. There's 3,000 people total watched.
Okay.
Well, you know,
So-
it's 448 members of the DNC
No, I know. This
who
is the
vote on
problem.
this. So
It's
This
the
is the
insider
fundamental
of
problem.
the insiders.
This is the fundamental problem to begin with. But what we were concerned with each candidate was sort of what you were describing, which is we're pretending as if our democracy and our culture and our hurtling towards fear and fascism, that all of this is normal. That all of this is normal. And the lack of imagination and the lack of urgency, I think Wickler was good. I think the solutions to the problem, it's almost as if there's like a burning house and you're like, you know what we should do? We should maybe get some water. You know what I mean? Like
Your
maybe.
lack of urgency.
Well,
Yeah,
I
there's
think-
just this lack of
Radical.
lack of radical ideas and lack of urgency.
I think there's a deep-seated lack of recognition that the house is burning. Yeah. It's almost like there's a conversation there that is as though we are performing in a vacuum. So that it really doesn't matter who we're running against. This is what the Democratic Party has to do. You can't compare what the Democratic Party has to do when Trump and Trumpism is in office compared to what we have to do when anyone else
Yes.
is in power.
Yes.
So they say they get that the house is burning, but I think they're so terrified by the burning house that they just keep thinking if we do what we already do, but a little bit more. They're obsessed. Many of the candidates are obsessed with the ground game.
Yes.
We're just going to improve the ground game. And no, believe me, this Democratic National Committee needs to improve its ground game, big time. But that's going to happen now. I'm very clear about that. That message has gotten out. And no matter who wins, the ground game is going to be a whole lot better. There's going to be far more attention to the states, far more sharing of power and money with the states. All of that is going to be a 365-day campaign. There's not going to be just coming to talk to people right before a presidential election. There's going to be attention to states and local communities. All that's going to happen pretty much no matter who wins, I believe. But there has to be so much more than that.
Yeah.
There has to be excitement. There has to be inspiration. You know, one of the candidates talks all the time how we're going to fight him, how we're going to fight him, how we're going to fight him. That's not how we are going to beat Donald Trump. First of all, if you take just the fight, he's already won on that level. Okay, okay. We're going to overcome it by inspiring the American people, exciting the American people. And that takes a level of audacity that matches his. The Democrat, you know, when I was growing up, the Democratic Party was the audacious one.
Yeah.
We claimed what we want. We were the free thinkers. Now we're like, it's just like during the primary, we have to vote for Joe. We have to vote for Joe. Rather than, wow, we should hear everybody.
Yes.
We should
Yeah.
hear everybody.
Yeah.
And the fact that so many people went along with that was very disappointing to me. But that's the past. Now we are where we are. We have to break free of this technocratic. We've become the boring people.
We are the boring
How did
party.
this happen?
So
we used to be the
boring.
cool people.
We're
We
the
used to
nerds.
be. We used to be the people who thought wow things, and we weren't afraid of disagreeing.
Yeah.
We weren't. I mean, everybody. No, we all have to think the same way. Actually, no, we don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you say we all have to, so then you say someone like Marianne Williamson, we don't need you. Bobby Kennedy, we don't need you. Or somebody else who doesn't think the way you think on K Street, we don't need you. Apparently you did.
You did.
Apparently you did.
Yeah, it turns out.
Sometimes they've acted like they were intent on shrinking shrinking the base of the Democratic Party. Those days have got to be over. We've got to be open to everybody, and let's yell it out. And that's democracy, and it's messy, and we don't have to agree. Sometimes, right before, I went to 2 Rosh Hashanah dinners, and one was in Washington and one was in New York. And the one with a bunch of Democrats was before the election, and they were all very nice people, and I knew we agreed on politics, and everybody was afraid to even talk about politics. And you brought them up and said, I think she's going to win. I hope she's going to win.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned something like, a lot of people are hungry in this country. A lot of people are selling their blood plasma. And one man who came from South Texas, he said, I think what she's talking about, we should talk about. And that gave people permission.
Yeah.
But there was almost like a fear of discussing anything because there's already been this decision made from on high that we're not going to, we're just going to vote for, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then I go to dinner in New York. I don't think it was MAGA people, but it was definitely right-leaning people. And everybody's yelling. It's one of those dinner parties.
Yeah.
Everybody's yelling. And it was one of those really fun dinner parties. No, we can't do that. That's idiot. And it was like fun. And I'm thinking, these used to be my people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way it should
These
be.
used to be
These
my
used
people.
to be our people. It's so true. Well, so, and Brad, I don't even know if you know this, but Marianne and I have known each other for like five years or so. And one of the 4 years, and one of the ways that we got to know each other is that I was helping via Culture House, my production company. We got connected. I can't even remember by who. But I was so taken by how Marianne was on the stage of the debate stage when you were running for president. The fact that you were audacious, the fact that you were the only candidate to bring up or like have a conversation about reparations, to remind people what the actual wages that people were trying to live and survive on, that you were direct and pointed in your critique of the party. And that I was just like, oh, we have to do a show. Like Marianne should have a political talk show, or like we tinkered around with a handful of ideas over the course of about a year, and then the pandemic and all sorts of things were happening. I know, but you're pointing out exactly so clearly what the party has become, and it's like when we were young activists. I wanted to be a Democrat because they cared about gay people and they weren't afraid to say so, because they cared about working class people and they weren't afraid to say so, because they were cool, because they seemed to be more aligned with culture. And over the course of my time in politics, the party seems to have become a really corporate, staid, shrinking thing that then you have to defend because you're watching them show up at the very last minute to talk to Black people. You're watching them wait to the very last minute to even bother talking about this, that, or the other. And it's just like, all of these people brought you here. Who are you for then? If we've lost the unions, if we're losing and hemorrhaging young Black people, young Latino people, like who are we? Who is this for?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see a lot of showing up for white people either.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm a Democrat because I want to be there for all people.
Yes.
We've got to get over the disunited states of America, and I think the Democrats have helped to create that disunity too. We are Black Americans, Jewish Americans, Arab Americans, gay Americans, and I think there's been too much concentration on what goes on after the hyphen. And I think that has really worked against us, because not only the people in the groups before the hyphen are aware of your hypocrisy, the people who only relate to the word after the hyphens are aware of your hypocrisy. They didn't wait until 3 weeks before to talk to anyone except people who were thinking, well, Liz Cheney says, and they're not even Democrats.
Yeah.
But once again, I think that so many of us are sick in our souls because of what you just said, because it gave Donald Trump the White House.
Yeah.
Twice.
In that whole year and a half that we weren't having a primary, a robust primary where people were really amplified, the Republicans were talking, they were having debates, they were having CNN town halls, and okay, what now? And I think what now is learning from all those mistakes, and a truly not just reimagined but recreated Democratic Party. So I guess this means that you'll move back to Washington D.C., right?
She was considering.
See, we need you here.
I know.
We need you. I see what happened. So I see what happened. So tell me if I'm right, okay? You, for all the reasons that you so eloquently just stated, you got into the political game and you saw that you could be in there. You were in there. You saw what happens behind those doors. It's a unique experience, okay? And then you said, I'm out here. I'm going to L.A. where I want to tell stories, right? Now, I don't know, but this is a question. It's like politics adjacent. But there's at a certain point where if we don't get our hands on the levers of power, if we don't get our hands on the levers of power. So what you do when you work in the field of wellness, higher consciousness, spirituality, arts, you're lifting the consciousness of people. Great, it's lifted.
Sure.
But the other people are still in charge of the levers of power.
Yeah.
And I saw that when I ran, that the American people are not the problem.
No.
No. But here's the thing, and you said this on the stage in Detroit, which I loved, because you had just mentioned, everyone keeps saying ground game, ground game, ground game. You know what? Our ground game, compared to Trump this past cycle, we had like 10 times the number of volunteers on the ground. The problem is the storytelling. The problem is the message. When you hit the doors, what are you saying? How are you persuading the American people to vote for a Democrat?
Two things about that. First of all, I was reading an interview with one of the major Fortune 500 CEOs not too long ago, and he said, 20 years ago, I was looking for people who knew technology. Today, I'm looking for storytellers.
Yeah.
That was number one. And number two, as I also said in Detroit, the Republicans have a story.
Yes.
A really effective one.
They and it's very cohesive. You know, you talk to, we like to tell ourselves they're low information voters. They're actually not low information. They're high information that they're getting from the Republican Party.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so it's a cohesive vision of things. The tragedy about all that to me is we have the true story. We're grounded in what's really gone down in this country for the last, 200 however many years. And the continuing story of the struggle between the oppressed and the oppressor. And anybody who says, oh, that's a cliche, well, what do you call corporate tyranny if not a systemic oppression?
Yeah.
And what you call 770 to 90 million people who are underinsured or uninsured, over 1 million people who are rationing their insulin, 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt, if not people whose lives are oppressed by the current economic model. We should be telling that story.
Yeah.
What are we so afraid of? Our power lies in saying it like it is.
So let's go back, because I think that most people that probably listen to our podcast have not read your books. Because the people that listen to our podcast are DC nerds.
Or what?
They're DC nerds. They're people who work in politics. Maybe there's some cool.
I think so.
Maybe there's some cool people in LA.
There's only so many DC nerds, and we're getting some pretty
is
good
true.
numbers.
This is true.
They're concentrated in this town.
Yeah.
This is why you have to move
This
here.
is true. But
We're trying to hold the space for
we are.
something else in this.
But I would love, because I don't think that most people know your story. Like, not to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
but
they've been definitely led a false narrative. They think I'm
Yeah.
a crystal lady with,
Yeah.
Yeah.
lightweight thinker. They're so smart.
Because
They're
here's the thing,
pseudo-sophisticates.
Marianne. Here's what I did in prep. Because, by the way, I never prep. Twig knows this. We never prep. But I prep because I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thank you.
And I wrote down some of my favorite passages from Return to Love. And here's one of my favorites. This is what I think of as the Democratic Party right now. Our self-perception determines our behavior. If we think we are small, limited, inadequate creatures, then we tend to behave that way. And the energy we radiate will reflect those thoughts no matter what we do. I think that that's the Democratic Party in a nutshell. I think that we are so afraid of making mistakes as a party. I think we're so afraid of offending any individual person. And I think what ends up happening is we don't stand for anything other than we need to fight Trump. We need to fight, not to quote you again, we need to fight you can't fight darkness. You can't beat darkness with more violence, and not to sound hippy dippy, but there's something like deeper than do we have more organizers to beat back this fascism? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's something undergirding. Donald Trump won the popular vote.
Yeah.
There's nothing that we can do to organize ourselves out of that. We fundamentally lost the narrative. Fear has beat love. Twice.
First of all, by the way, those people had no problem offending me. So when you say they're so afraid of offending people, that was not my experience.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
True,
so the lies,
true.
the smears, the character assassination, they have no, yeah. But I want to tell you a story that happened to me yesterday because it's happened to me all over this country. I'm leaving Detroit. I'm talking to the doorman at the building.
Yeah.
And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Washington, D.C." He said, "Are you going to the inauguration?" I said, "No, I'm not a Republican. I'm a Democrat, and I will not be going to the inauguration." I said, "Did you vote for the president-elect?" He said, "Well, I have just moved to Michigan, and I'm still registered in Illinois." He said, "I did make $500 on a bet that he would win." I said, "Okay." Then I said, "Would you have voted for him?" And he said, "Yes, I would have." And he was a really nice man. We had been talking for a few minutes, and I said, "Let me just ask you, don't you have a problem with the fact that he's like a bad guy, that he lies, that he's so mean? Isn't that a problem for you?" And he looked at me, and he looked very bewildered. And like many people that I've had that conversation with, he didn't deny that. This is what he said. He said, "I used to live in Chicago. I was a doorman, and I had a limo company. And I made over 6 figures. And my wife didn't have to work. He said, now I'm a doorman here. My wife works." And then he goes on to spend about 5 minutes talking to me about the price of steaks that they can no longer buy. And I said, "Do you really think Trump is going to do anything about that?" He said, "I don't know, I hope so." I said, "So you thought maybe it would happen with him, but you knew it wasn't happening with the current group?" He said, "Yes."
Yeah.
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 That to me is it. And I've spoken to so many people like him. And these were nice people, and they were good people. And a friend of mine said that he's a podcast host, really great guy, Paul Dolman in Martha's Vineyard. He said he went to a Trump rally. And at the end of it, he said, "I just wanted to experience it. I wanted to experience." He's a Democrat like us. As he was leaving, he said, "I asked in my heart," it's like I said, "God, what is it? Why? And he said, I really felt a message, an answer in my spirit was, people will go with false hope before they'll go for no hope."
Yeah.
Sure.
We were running on telling people that you think it's bad, but actually it's good.
Yeah.
And people want to be seen, and we want to be heard, particularly our pain. Our pain validated. And we did not validate people's pain. Now, you can say, "Yeah, but Trump didn't mean it." Well, maybe he was smarter, though.
Yeah.
You know, that he at least... And that's what happened in 2016. The 2 candidates who said the system is rigged against you and you have every right to be angry were Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump.
Yes.
And I believe that if the hand hadn't been put on the scale, I don't know whether Bernie or Hillary would have won that primary, but I think we still would have won. The Democrats would have won because every Democrat would have been happy about it.
Right.
That's why we've got to change our own. We've got to look in our own house, and that's why I hope I'll have a chance to help do that.
So back to Brad's, I would love for you to tell us more about even just your politicization and like your experience of politics over the course of your life, and how you first became a Democrat and all of that. And then
I grew up in a very left-wing home. My father used to walk around the house, beat the system kids. My father was a labor organizer for the CIO, then it was called the CIO, in Detroit, trying to unionize the Ford Motor Company. He used to read the Eye of Stone daily, every day. Anytime you asked my father who he voted for, he would say Roosevelt. That was the kind of home I grew up in. But as my own life journey unfolded, it seemed to me, and still this is my grounding, that my work in the field of personal transformation and so forth was where I could best contribute. When my career began, it was in the 1980s. And very shortly after I started lecturing, the AIDS crisis happened. And so I became very, very involved with a community of sufferers. And because of that, because of my activism, because of my founding a nonprofit, I was all over it. And I became, the joke used to be, nobody calls Marianne because things are going well. I was the person you called after the test came back and, it's cancer. The accountant has said there's nothing we can do but bankruptcy. My child has died. Whatever. And it was a privilege and a blessing. In the 1980s and into the 1990s, most of the people I met in this country who were going through agonizing hours, for most of the people that I met, the crisis was the exception and not the rule. It was when I moved to Detroit in 1998 that I began to see, and then traveling around, that I began to meet so many people for whom the crisis was the rule and not the exception. The problem wasn't just that you had cancer. The problem was you don't have health care. The problem wasn't just you couldn't find a job. The problem is that you can't support a family on just one job. I began to see how many people I met whose lives were in deep, chronic despair that was due at least indirectly from bad public policy.
Yeah.
I remember a U.S. Senator saying to me at the time, Miss Williamson, do you think that there's maybe anything we could do about all this mental health crisis? I remember looking her in the eye and saying, yeah, try not driving so many people crazy all the time. Maybe make it so that people aren't living constantly on edge because they have no idea how, as in the 1970s, they could ever attain buying a house, which most couples could do then, taking a yearly vacation, sending their kids to college. I just saw that no amount of private charity, because I was already really involved founding Project Angel Food. I was already very involved in founding nonprofits and raising millions of dollars for charity. But I began to see that no amount of private charity could compensate for a basic lack of social justice. And then this system, the $50 trillion transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to top 1%, then this system that causes so much unnecessary suffering would say to people like me, can you just make it, I hope you can make it easier for people. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
You're going to look at therapists and clergy and spiritual counselors with some pseudo respect, hoping that we can help people be more resilient during these tough times. They're only tough times because you're giving all the money to a very few people who are your friends. And because, I haven't had any experiences that are particularly unique. I mean, we all have had to some extent. But I do think what's unique is that I'm very socioeconomically well-traveled. I worked for Oprah. I've spent quality time with some of the richest, most advantaged people in this country. I have spent quality time with some of the most disadvantaged people in this country. It's not nice people versus not nice people. It's not good people versus not good people. Not every rich person is a greedy bastard. Not every poor person is wholly impure. But you really see when you've traveled, as I've traveled, the system itself is so unfair.
Yeah.
And to me, the Democratic Party should be addressing that. The Democratic Party should be correcting that. And in too many ways, the Democratic Party has enabled that. This stuff started with the Republicans, but the Democrats haven't stopped it. Am I wrong?
You're not.
No.
You're not. President Biden said in his farewell address, which was beautiful, that, sort of warned the country, the impending oligarchy, the impending, I like to call it the broligarchy. I'm working on it.
It's definitely a broligarchy.
It's a broligarchy.
It's definitely broligarchy.
But you hit the nail on the head. You were like, bro, it's been here.
Yeah.
It's not an impending oligarchy. It's a continuing oligarchy.
Been here.
And some of them are Democrats. Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Although,
it's just a
you know,
less, it's a more audacious one.
Yeah.
we have to have as much audacity as he has. And also, I have a friend who is a billionaire who once said to me, my taxes are so low, it's obscene.
Yeah.
Many billionaires actually agree with us.
Yeah.
So Marianne, let's get to it, because I love that you're running. But I think we all agree that the system itself, I mean, I'm just going to say it. I just think this whole DNC chair is bullshit. I think there's like 400 party insiders. They, in and of themselves, many of them have cast numerous ballots. So these are the same people that have voted for Jamie, Tom Perez, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, right? We are now counting on those same 400 people to fix this, right?
Yeah, but it's not quite what you just said, because when there's a Democratic president, the
Some of them
DNC
got
chair
appointed.
is appointed.
Good point.
Yeah.
Good
So
point.
this is the first time in a long time
That there's an actual election.
that the membership actually has
Okay.
a chance to fundamentally change things. Now, you're right that there are many people within that system, like you said, Jamie Harrison, his rolled eyes tweet when I announced that I was running.
Sure.
That faction is there. I don't know what they're so proud of. I mean, could we have failed more? Could we have failed more? We lost the House, we lost the Senate, we lost the White House.
Some humble
We've lost
pie.
and
He
all
needs
these
a little bit of humble pie.
all these state houses that aren't just red; they are super majority red. So you go on and keep rolling your eyes, boys. Yeah, I understand that, but I also think that there are some people in the DNC who get that it has to change. Some of them, however, there are a lot of smoke and mirrors in some of these campaigns.
Yeah.
And people claiming to represent change who, believe me, do not represent change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I
then-
was involved in the 2017 DNC chair race on behalf of Keith Ellison,
Who I love.
when he was running against Tom
That
Perez.
was an example when Obama came in and said he wanted Perez.
Absolutely.
Perfect
Shut it
example
down. And like
of the-
I had like the Ohio votes for Keith, and then
Yep.
Barack Obama literally called, I think, David Pepper, and David Pepper at the time was the chair of the Ohio party, and was like, sorry, Carrie, like there's nothing I can do.
Is that not happening right now, though? Let's just also be real. Is there
this is
not
what I'm
a
saying.
finger on the scale for one candidate from...
We don't have a Democratic president.
Well-
we don't have an Obama figure.
No, I know, but there is still a White House currently, and that White House is putting their...
I don't think
No,
they
they
care.
don't
I
have
don't
that.
think. I don't think the Biden people care. I think.
No.
I don't know if their Obama proxy is weighing in. I mean, I think that's been an open question. Is like, is there going to like?
Is there a
Who is
proxy?
at the top of the mountain?
There
who
isn't anyone.
actually-
That's why this particular race is different. Now, what Clinton did in 1995 was he appointed a co-chairman situation. He appointed a national chair and a general chair. Chris Dodd to be going out there
that's
giving the
right.
message,
Yeah.
and Don Fowler to handle the ground game.
Harry
I've been
said that.
advocating for this.
That's
Harry's
what they
been
should
saying
do.
that for weeks. He's like,
Ken
why
Martin
don't
and
we...
Marianne Williamson is what I think would be the great one. In Ken Martin, you have someone who, on the level of the ground game, in my mind, is the guy. My argument, however, is that no ground game is going to be enough.
Agreed.
We need,
Totally.
sometimes people are so afraid of change, but what the Democratic Party needs to be afraid of now is not changing.
Agreed.
And somebody from the outside brings perspective and insight, and once again, what are you holding on to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, hopefully that's a lesson that was learned in 2016, right? No one wanted to make Barack Obama upset, even though he was in his post-presidency. And so they picked his candidate for the DNC chair. And I think really solidified, and this will eventually lead to a question that I have for you, but I think really solidified the fact that Bernie never got a fair shake. He didn't get a fair shake when he was running, and then the contribution that he made of animating millions of people into the Democratic Party, and or potentially keeping a faction of like working class and white guy voters in the Democratic Party longer than anyone else had been able to manage when they were ready to go, but then Bernie gave them a reason to stay, really solidified that we were not a place that was welcoming to them or their kind of presence, right? And I'm hoping that the DNC members who are confronted with the decision that they have right now, don't make the same mistake of refusing to change because it seems unorthodox or scary. And that's the impression that I got in 2017, which was there was people just, for whatever reason, and there was never even a clear one to me, but they just didn't want there to be any Bernie-esque anything anywhere near the DNC. And it was to our detriment.
There's a cluster, a handful of consultancy firms and a few people. And they have their story, they're sticking to it. And I realized when I was running this time, those people would rather Trump win again than let someone like me be the nominee.
Yeah, sure.
And it's a power thing. And so I think that everybody running right now is saying, I will be the change agent. But, you know, it's like Moses couldn't enter into the promised land because no one with the consciousness of the old could actually bring forth the new. And so that's what people are saying. And also they create narratives about people. So I think about myself, some people would say, yeah, we want change, but we want change in the same, within the same
marginal
box. Yeah, we're not too far outside the box. When anything inside the box, like I said, I think we could have both, but we do need both.
Yeah. Well, you explain, I think that one of the things that remains really mystifying to the party, to people who are paying attention closely to politics and party politics, and I do sort of mean in the Beltway sense, people seem really flabbergasted by Make America Healthy Again, by RFK, by so many of the dynamics that were at play. And I think that we have gone deep. There's a lot of think pieces and postmortems on white working class voters and on young and black and Latino voters and so on. But I don't think people really understand where wellness came into politics.
In the 2020 campaign on the debate stage, I said that we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sickness care system. If you remember, I continued. I said, but then of course to address that, we're going to have to address food policies, and we're going to have to address chemical policies, and we're going to have to address agriculture policies. And that was the point. And Miss Williamson, I don't remember, Lester Holt or whomever, and cut off my mic because that was going right. And if anyone read those policies that I was talking about. Now, once again, Bobby ran. Apparently he tried to call Kamala. She wouldn't take his call. Like, I got almost 500,000 people in the primaries voted for me, which when you look at the efforts of suppression and infiltration and de-amplification is kind of extraordinary. And when you look at the 1 million people that Bobby had gotten on his signatures, are we trying to win here? Or are we just trying to protect our outdated, obsolete worldview?
Yeah.
What's the goal here?
Yeah.
And I think that's something you can say about the Republicans. They want to win.
Yeah.
Anybody have it? Look, you know, Vivek Ramaswamy, where'd he come from? He hadn't served in office before.
Right.
This idea, no, you have to be one of us. Their idea of qualified is qualified to perpetuate the system as it is. That system has been rejected by the American people.
Repeatedly
now, and pretty completely at this point. So can we open this up and just let open the windows and anybody got, and that's how the Democratic Party should be. And if I were to be the leader, it certainly would be. Anybody got a good idea? Got a good idea? You know, a friend of mine, Eleanor LeCain, said to me something I thought was so interesting. She said the problem is that the people with solutions don't have the power, and people with the power don't have the solutions. We have the solutions. Healthcare, energy, economics. We have the solutions, but too often the solutions don't have the power, and the people with power don't really want to hear about the solutions because they wouldn't necessarily contribute to short-term profits for their donors. We've just got to break all that up. We have to take a velvet hammer to that stuff, and it's got to be done soberly. It's got to be done wisely. It's got to be done responsibly. It's got to be done respectfully, but it must be done, or the Democratic Party is going to be over, actually. And we don't have time for the Democratic Party to fail. And I'm sure you too have had people say to you, certainly said to me, why are you trying to prop up the Democratic Party?
Every day.
Yeah, and that's my answer. Because we don't have time for them to fail.
Well, you don't have a choice. I mean, that's the other part too, right? Which is, I think I love that you're involved. And this is the reason why I completely agree with you. All of the pundits and I don't even want to give their names any shine here on this podcast, who are rolling their eyes at your candidacy. You
Or
care
anyone
enough,
who
or
disagrees.
anyone,
We
anyone.
started this
Yeah.
podcast in the wake of the first of President Biden's debate performance,
Yeah.
right? And even us having a public conversation about like that was a disqualifying event. I don't know
Yeah.
that you can recover from that. And the number of people who shouted us down for even saying it in public, and it was like,
Yeah.
this is what everyone is saying.
Yeah.
This is what are you talking? People saw that.
Yeah.
How are we going to
And then I
pretend as
said-
though it's not true?
And I made a video at that time, and then even when they did that ridiculous just handover to Kamala, I said, great, I'll debate Kamala. You wouldn't let me debate
Yeah.
Joe Biden, let me debate Kamala. Oh, no. Oh, really? Well, I really do not want that debate, and I think I know why, and I think you do too.
It would have been, I mean, this is the other part too, and it's not just us saying this. It would have been to Kamala's benefit for her to debate you. I mean,
Well,
because
actually,
every
ultimately, I don't,
candidate,
but I understand what you're
I mean, you know, but even if she were to continue and
Yeah.
win, it would have strengthened her candidacy, in my humble opinion.
That
right?
crowd likes to say that that stuff had nothing to do with our loss.
Oh, the fact that there wasn't a primary.
And Americans everywhere you go say, I didn't like the fact that they just decided who the person was going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, so here's my thing though, Marianne, because I'm a huge fan of yours. I am excited by your courage, because it is courage. It's courageous for you.
At this point.
You know what I mean? Yeah, because you know you're going to catch shit. You know that
I
people are going to not want you on that stage,
Yeah.
right? You know that people are threatened by your ideas, but you're like,
Don't
I
talk to her. Don't
Yeah,
talk
exactly.
to her.
Don't talk to
return her
Marianne.
phone call. Wait. Don't return her text.
But you're doing it anyway. Here's my thing. And Twig and I have said this. And actually, I think it might have been Ken, who talked about, regardless of who wins the chair race, at the end of the day, it's like, let's just be honest here. While it is a very important thing who is the DNC chair, what's more important is all of us, you, Twig, myself, all of us are committed to continuing to help tell this story, right? And so I guess the question for you is, like, how do you envision your participation in communicating, regardless of if you win or not, communicating what the Democratic Party is doing each and every day? And maybe I'm sounding too defeatist. I just
No,
know
that doesn't sound defeatist.
I just know who these characters are that are going to be voting. So
Yeah,
I'm
but
just
I
trying
know-
to be,
yeah. But
like
Yeah,
on
I
the other
hear you.
side of it.
But I know who the characters are who are running.
Yeah.
So you just said that no matter who wins,
Mm-hmm.
we all need to come together and tell the Democratic story.
Yeah.
I happen to know, in ways that I don't think would serve for me to say here, that if certain people win, it's just going to be the same old, same old.
Yeah.
And so
That's not good.
as I said in the forum the other night, my loyalty is not to my party. My loyalty is to my country. You know, George Washington, in his farewell address, said that he was warning us about political parties. And he said that they can form factions of men more loyal to their party than to their country. And I think that's what's happened here.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened. We don't like that it's happening with Trump, but it's
We do the same thing. I
We,
know.
they're like, oh, you can't just do it just because Trump says. Well, just do it because it's what the DNC says.
Yeah.
We don't like. We got to get back to we all own this country and we're all free thinkers and belongs to all of us and nobody has a monopoly on the truth. And you know, when Will Rogers said, "I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a Democrat." That was a good thing. That was the good thing. It was the good thing that we were
Yes.
messy. We were the wild and crazy people. But
Yes.
but it was because of that we all felt safe that we're all going to show up and vote for Democrats.
Yeah.
So I think at this point, no, I also I'm not naive about third-party efforts because I understand, number one, how extremely expensive, and I understand you have the same mishegas there as you would have here. But also, remember, abolition came from the Abolitionist Party, women's suffrage came from the Women's Party.
Yes.
Somebody's got to tell the truth. My interest is in telling truth.
Yeah.
I believe in what John F. Kennedy said. those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. After what happened with the murder of the CEO, the United Healthcare CEO, how much more evidence do we need? People are not going to take this. Somebody has got to speak. Somebody has got to speak for the people in this country who are having such a hard time. And like I said, I've told your story many, many times around the country. Now, does the problem lie with the Democratic electorate? No. Does the problem lie with Democratic senators and congressmen? They're great people doing great work.
Agreed.
Democrats in this town and around this country. I have great respect for many Democratic lawmakers and candidates. That's why I'd love to help create the perfect megaphone for them. But if there is a system that continues to suppress the louder voices, we'll have to see. If there is, then I'll be. Listen, I'm going to do what I'm going to do what I do to the best of my ability, and that's speak what my heart's truth is. There's a psychological principle that people hear you on the level that you speak to them from, and when you speak your visceral, gut, soulful feelings, people hear that. And the Democratic Party, in too many ways, speaks from up here. We need to speak from here and here.
Well, we
The
speak from
people are ready
focus
for that.
groups, Marianne. We
Yeah.
speak from data-tested focus groups. And, I mean, the one thing that you can say about Trump, my parents are Trump voters. So my
Wow.
mom is Korean, my dad's black.
Wow. And
They
they're
voted
Trump
for
voters.
Trump. They voted for Trump twice.
Twice.
I worked
Three
in the
times.
White House.
They voted for him 3 times.
They voted for him 3 times.
Yeah.
And so, I reject this notion, which saying this in this town sometimes upsets people, that people that vote for Donald Trump are bad people, or that people that vote for Donald Trump are dumb people, or people that vote for Donald Trump aren't good Americans.
I agree with you.
Because you know what? It's not my parents' fault. We have not offered them a better alternative.
Absolutely.
If you can't, knowing my parents' story, if you can't convince them
That's right.
of a direction
That's
and of a
right.
human that's better than Donald Trump, shame on us.
Thank you. That's
You
my
know?
feeling.
And that is the thing that it's heartbreaking, to be honest, when I watch the forum and we speak to a lot of these candidates and we watch the news every day. And I just think we're fundamentally missing everything. I think Democrats are fundamentally missing that we've lost the story of America. We've lost the narrative completely.
Franklin Roosevelt said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivered on its promises. If democracy was delivering on its promises, we would have universal health care by
Yes,
now. We would
yes.
have tuition-free college and tech school opportunities the way we had before the 1970s. We would have serious climate change mitigation. We would have the PRO Act. We would have a higher minimum wage. And in everything that I just mentioned, they're probably listening, yeah, but we tried to blah, blah, blah. And I could come right back at you and say, yeah, but we didn't try hard enough. And you know as well as I do that he let the parliamentarians stop them. Or you know as well as I do that they didn't actually fight that fight. And you know as well as I do. So we've simply got to stop enabling the incrementalists in the Democratic
Yes.
Party. We have to have audacity. We have to claim what we want. Donald Trump's going to claim what he wants. We need to claim what we want. Within 5 years, there's going to be every person in America will have health care. Within 5
Yes.
years, every person in
Oh my God,
America
yes.
will have a
Preach.
safe place to live. Within 5 years, every person in America who works hard will be able to, on one job, one salary, have dignity, have safety, and support a family because we say so. And not only that, we're going to tell you each and every day what we're doing to make it happen.
Yes.
And we're going to make it hot and sexy and fun and wonderful for you to be part of the process.
I literally just got chills. That was
Good.
very exciting.
It's so
Good.
true. There was
Vote
not a
for me.
single bold. Twig and I were at the convention, Marianne. There was not a single bold idea around healthcare. Like I was losing my mind.
That's
Yeah.
all I talked about on my campaign. And by the way, a majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want universal health care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Over half of our bankruptcies are medical bankruptcies. 1.3 million people rationing their insulin, people selling their blood plasma, putting in no other advanced nation do you have people putting up GoFundMe pages to pay for to pay for life-saving operations. And it's that issue of underinsurance. We say, oh, people have insurance. But how often they have insurance that doesn't cover the tests that the doctor says you have to have, the operation the doctor says you have to have, or for 18 million people, the prescription drugs that the doctor has prescribed.
Yeah.
I've talked to doctors who have said to me, I don't even know why I bother to practice medicine anymore. I remember Dr. Victoria Dooley in Detroit saying, if it was 20 years ago, I'm not sure how long, she said, people used to say to me, if I said you need a certain treatment, they would say, what are the side effects? She said, now they are more likely to say, how much would it cost?
That's devastating. In this
2
country.
cardiologists have told me that. They'll come in and I know what's wrong and I tell them what they need and they just look at me with such sad eyes.
Yeah.
It's so immoral. You know, it used to be that morality was a part of the larger conversation.
Yeah.
And the right side of the political spectrum has always been more focused on personal issues of personal morality. But the left used to be focused on issues of public morality. To me, economic justice is a moral issue. It's immoral.
Yeah.
It's immoral that millions of American children go to schools where they don't even have the adequate resources to teach a child to read. And if that child cannot learn to read by the age of 10, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. That's a moral issue. It's a moral transgression to invade a country that didn't do anything to you.
Yeah.
So when we became we don't talk about anything soulful. Bobby Kennedy Sr. sure did.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King sure did. John F. Kennedy said we cannot afford to be materially rich but spiritually poor. And now someone bringing that conversation in to a country where 90% of the people say they believe in God is called woo-woo.
And is
Yeah.
chased
How
out.
dare you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. So, but you bring up something that I find really concerning about this moment, and it does make the DNC race overall feel like it is such a tip of this broader issue, because yes, we have to tell a better story about what Democrats do, but we actually need Democrats to then do it.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't know where the interaction between the party and the elected leaders makes that
That's
happen.
interesting that you say that, because I would like to think that were I to be chair, I would not only be telling people in Washington, not only telling people out in America what they're doing in Washington, but I would like the opportunity to tell people in Washington, this is what they're saying.
Yeah.
I've been out there. You guys really need to know this is what they want. You might know what the people in your particular district know. You might know what your donors are saying, but I'm telling you what people in the larger field of the American electorate are saying. You're right. If they're not doing it, then what story can you tell? Which is why I said to you before, no, I'm not going to be a voice for an organization that hasn't fundamentally repaired its course.
Yeah.
There have been, there's so many places to go here, though, because at the same time, this administration has done great things. This administration, if you look at infrastructure, if you look at the investments made with regards to climate, if you look at, there have been some positive things that have taken place over the course of the past few years.
There have been positive.
But there have been
we don't brag about ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the
Republicans
piece is
don't walk
Americans
their talk.
Don't know.
We don't talk our walk.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I would wish to do and
Yeah.
would do as chair of the DNC is brag. Can we brag? Can I tell you what happened today? I want you to know what the Democrats did today. And also, when Obama was president, people would ask him about something and he would say, well, I'm not even going to try because we don't have the votes. Let people know you're trying.
Yeah.
Let people know what you stand for. So part of my job would be saying to people, we didn't make it, but I want you to know what we tried to do.
Yeah.
And I want you to know we lost by we have a they have a razor-thin majority, but we almost made it. And I want you to know how hard we tried.
Yeah.
Every single day, tell the story.
Yeah, we have to get caught trying.
So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got to
I
get
love
caught trying.
that. Great
I love
line.
that. That's
Great
a really
line.
good line. You should just steal that, Marianne. Okay, so February, when is the election? February 2nd?
First.
Is that what it is?
Is it February 1st? February 1st comes, and guess what? You won. in a surprise victory.
Very,
I just watched, by the
very
way,
big surprise.
I just watched Conclave last night. Great film. I
Okay.
feel like
It
it's
is a
like
great film.
Conclave.
I want to see it.
You know what I mean? Like you're like the dark horse candidate right now, and there's going to be multiple ballots, and somehow Marianne pulls it out in the end. What is the first order of business?
First thing I do is I call Ken Martin.
I like
And
this.
I say, I need you sitting right next to me, and we will do this. I need you to be my partner, because when it comes to the ground game,
Yeah.
we're going to work together very, very closely. He would be my first call. But the technicians should not be leading. The technicians should be leading the ground game. You know, we need the excitement. We need the inspiration. We
yeah.
need the storytelling. We need to make the cohesive story. Gather the storytellers, call people like yourselves. Guys, we need the artists, we need the creative types. We need to completely redo this and do things that I feel I've been schooled to do for the last 40 years. I want the Democratic Party to be more than a container for the political conversation as we have known it.
Yes.
I want politics to seem meaningful to people. I don't want politics to be something that seems so toxic to people that they don't even want anything to do with it. That's what MAGA has been able to succeed at. People feel they're part of something bigger.
Yes.
And so I don't want people to just feel like, well, if I vote for a Democrat, maybe this policy will change. I want you to feel that politics is part of a meaningful, political activism at this point in our nation's history and in our world has got to be part of what we consider a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life.
Yes.
And that's what I don't think the Democrats provide, and what I believe that people like myself and people like yourselves, actually, people who have been out there and know there's so many more layers of human existence than just here,
Yes.
right? And that's what I would bring to it.
And I think that brings up an important point that again, to Brad's point, DC, I like DC. DC can be a very linear place, and young people who I think are attracted to politics and attracted to DC tend to start at least from a linear place, a linear way of thinking about the world. And then as they get experience, you know, DC is great about thinking about an ecosystem, but then you go through things and you start to need additional tools. And I think it is lost on so many people here that you have sold you have actually shaped in the way that we're talking about.
Yes.
More of how people interact with the world and how they think about their daily lives and how they spend their time and how they interact with their spouse. Like you have had
themselves.
such in themselves.
Yeah.
You've had such a profound impact as an author, as a public speaker, as a public leader for so long. And it remains shocking to me that you don't get the credit for that you deserve, and that for whatever reason it doesn't seem to translate
It does seem
into
to be an irrational animus
but
against
it
me,
truly,
given that I thought we were the party that supported women. Really?
right.
Really?
But even just from a credentialed standpoint,
Yeah,
you
I
were
know.
on like New York Times bestseller for like 10 years or something. Like you literally sold like
Right.
tens
I
of
know.
millions of books and audiobooks. Like
Well-
you are dominant in shaping the most intimate ways that people exist. And politics is an intimate act. It is about where you send your kid to school, your medical life, your all of these things. And it just remains shocking to me that
Well, you know, if you don't,
we aren't coming to you. The fact that you're coming to us and trying to solve the
No,
problem.
honestly, that's a very good point.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I was in a subculture where people knew who I was, so I didn't think I needed to tell my story.
Right.
I came into politics, people didn't know who I was, and because I didn't tell my story, I thought it was bragging, they were able to come in and create a false narrative,
Yes.
create the doppelganger, and once it stuck, and ridiculous things were said, ridiculous notions, like she's doing it to sell books. In my field, the way you sell books, never mention politics. So but if you haven't told that story, I didn't tell my story. So their story, and believe me, these things are consciously created by people paid a lot of money to smear.
100%.
So thank you.
It's also not too late, Marianne. I will also say I've been doing a lot of work with the Surgeon General's team. And as you know, he's
Yes.
been doing so much work on
Emotional.
on the epidemic of loneliness,
Yeah.
alienation, mental
He's
health
one of us.
and wellness.
He's
He's
read-
incredible. He's so good. But so much and he just wrote a prescription for America and identified the number one, it's the sleeping epidemic, which is mental health, particularly youth mental health. And what you've written about for decades is still perhaps even more resonant today than it's ever been, in my humble opinion.
Because eternal truths. I don't care if you're living in 1860 or 1960 or 2024. Life lived in what seems like a random, meaningless universe hurts. And working with other people in a pursuit that is bigger than you are feels good. And MAGA has created a sense that we are creating something bigger than the individual. That should be ours. How did they get that?
It's unbelievable.
But at the same time, you've described it. And also with what you were saying, I grew up at a time where it wasn't what you just described, where it was there's a counterculture. It was a change of everything. It was musical, it was sexual, it was cultural, it was political, it was everything.
Yeah.
And you read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the morning, and you went to a Vietnam anti-war protest in the afternoon, and nobody told you to stay in your lane. You're not supposed to have a lane. I'm an American. We're multidimensional people.
Yeah.
Who the hell created this political class? And they were qualified to weigh in. At what point do we recognize the failure is so deep? Clearly not.
Yeah.
Well,
Clearly.
this was the missing ingredient, right? I mean, the recurring theme of Twigg and I started Zooming with each other after that first disastrous debate. And it was peaks and valleys through that whole period. But what we kept saying, Marianne, identifying, is that the right sort of hacked into culture with trusted voices.
Good way to put it.
Trusted voices that are not political. These are trusted voices who, some of them are influencers, some of them are UFC fighters,
Right.
some of them are right-wing provocateurs. But they were reaching, MAGA became something that was not political. MAGA became, as you just described, community.
Absolutely.
Became like, I'm a part of a thing, and this is cool. And also,
that thing is cool.
And that thing is
Not
cool.
Only
It's
am I a part
subversive.
of something, but that thing is also fun and sexy and cool, and has some edge.
And I can't even talk about it because I might get canceled. If,
Yeah.
there's an edge to it all.
Totally crucified.
Yeah.
It's like, we don't need you. We don't want you. Actually, I think you do. Actually,
Yes.
and for all the reasons that you're saying.
Yes.
But penetrating.
Yeah. And what you said earlier, and I know we got to wrap up, but one of the things that you said earlier that really just like, if my jaw dropped on camera, that the psychological principle that people
Hear you on the level that you speak to them from.
Yes.
And
If you speak from only up here.
yeah. And that's what we've been doing. We've so prioritized intellectualism, despite the fact that we have been shown over and over and over again that it doesn't necessarily translate at this particular era in this moment. And then Donald Trump, who's this deeply intuitive, who seems to be guided wholly by intuition or gut instinct.
The part of the brain that decides who to vote for is a different part of the brain than the part of the brain that analyzes an issue. So when people would say to me, politicians would say, we had them on the issues. Yeah, but that's not the part of the brain that decided who to vote for. They like his audacity.
Yeah.
They're not interested in this namby-pamby, well, we tried, maybe next, we didn't get a mandate, maybe in the next term, and then you realize you motherfuckers aren't really planning to do this at all, are you? You really get like, you really aren't going to do this, are you? And that's how people feel.
Yeah.
And there's a great line, love restores reason and not the other way around. You say that we've used all this intellectualism, but it hasn't really been very smart, has it? Because over 62% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 70% of Americans are living with chronic economic anxiety. So in the
Which
richest
is
country in the
devastating
world,
to your
we're
health. And we have no health care.
We have
to
a
catch
matrix
people.
of corporate tyrants, really. Insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food, big agriculture, big chem, gun manufacturers, big banks, financial institutions, big oil, and defense contractors. And their short-term profit maximization has become our bottom line.
Yeah.
And it has become our governing principle. And their profits and their going for those profits has replaced humanitarian values. It's replaced our democratic values. And their undue financial influence has turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery.
Yes.
So that our government more often than not enables that corporate tyranny. And that's got to break. And it should be the Democratic Party standing for that break. Standing for that break. And then if we do that, we'll lose some money. Wait a minute. Hillary had so much more money.
Yes, so
than Trump did. And we know about the absurd expenditures of Kamala. Human relationships are the gold at this point. It's like we were talking about storytelling and human relationships and soulful connection. Those are our riches. If you're making money at the expense of your soulful connection with your voters, your money is worthless paper.
I couldn't agree more. Everyone keeps bringing this up, and I know it's important in this DNC chair race, like fundraising, prowess, this, that, and the other. We forget Bernie Sanders was outraising Hillary Clinton.
That's right, on little donations.
He was outraising her on $1, $5, $10 donations. Right. It does not matter how many billionaires you have. There are just more people, And I think that the thing that the DNC does not realize is they've never truly had a grassroots campaign. They've always...
More than you even know.
They've always been beholden to a certain kind of class of donor.
No, late 70s. It was in the late 70s that the Democratic Party started taking corporate money. And that's when the moral authority just started leaking out of the bottom of the boat. And also when people have asked me about that as a candidate, people who donated to the Democratic Party, both small donors and big donors, are unimpressed by the low return on their investment.
True.
So the idea that somebody who's not causing serious change is going to go out there, but we're going to be a good fundraiser. The reason I think I'd be the best fundraiser is because I could say to people, I know we failed, but I get it. And we're going to do it so different this time. Would you please invest in the new beginning because the values still matter? Please help me recreate. Because if it's somebody saying, this time we can do it better. I think there's a difference, I believe, due to the fact that so many Republicans come from the private sector. So in the private sector, if you come from business and it's not working on Tuesday, you better change it by Thursday. And if you don't change it by Thursday, this whole business could go under on Saturday.
True.
The Democrats say it's not working on Tuesday, but we're just going to do it more. And on Thursday, people are saying this whole thing is going down. Now we're at a place where it did go down on Saturday, and they're still talking about doing it again on Monday.
It's true.
Yeah.
No, it's gone down, and we have to save it. And that's because, if we're honest, there are so many people whose money and contracts and power doesn't change one way or the other.
Yes. That's
they
what I was
should
getting
no
at.
longer be in power at the DNC. I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Say less. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you want anyone potential voters to know, or just anyone listening?
Well, one, I didn't know you lived in D.C.
Yes,
so
I
you
live
have to
in
come
DC.
back. We would love for you to come back. We've had lots of, our friend Tom Bonnier's come back multiple times.
Well, have you been here a lot doing these?
We do the here.
I have been here quite a bit, and then there was a moment where I was thinking about moving back to DC, and then Donald Trump got elected, and I was like, maybe not,
I
maybe
think
not.
this is the moment.
You think
Yes,
it's the moment?
see?
My mom's here right now, and she and I were in the car together today, moving around the city, and she was just like, "You should come back."
Yeah, I think you. I was
I
thinking
agree.
that the last 30 minutes. That's all I've been able to think about. When it's over, when the cameras are off, but the cameras are still on.
Cameras are still
Yeah,
on, but
I'm
we'll
feeling
keep
that.
going. I agree. So you
All
got to
right,
listen to
guys.
Marianne.
All right.
We're gonna
well,
do it.
But back to you. Anything
you.
else? Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you for all your
here.
time.
And
Thank
for
you.
everything you're bringing to the party and
Thank
to
you.
this race, and for everything that you have tried to warn Democrats of
Yes.
and inject into the Democratic Party's value system, and doing so even when they've ignored you and even when they've shunned
friends
you
say to
and
me,
actively worked
"What?
against you.
Why would you trade a career where you're a success for a career where you're a total loser? Why are
No.
you're like a leg limp,
Oh.
the leg limp and holding on. But I think the only real failure is failure to speak what is in your heart. And So there's a success in saying it. As far as those of you who might be DNC members or close to a DNC member that perhaps you could talk to, we will have a better ground game. But that won't be enough. We have to meet Donald Trump on the level of emotional and psychological frequency that's really toe-to-toe with him. And if you want that, you're going to have to vote for me.
There's no one else.
It's true. It's very true.
really
Might not
is
be the
true.
greatest visionary in America, but I'm the only one running for DNC chair.
So true.
Love it.
Marianne, we love you.
Thank you
you.
for your
Appreciate
time.
it.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.